Alright, I got to replace the radiator fan assembly on the Rio today. This is going to be the same for 2013 to 2017. Might even be the same radiator for later years. They had the same engine, but I'm having an issue where, of course, we had some overheating because the fan isn't working, but we keep putting in new fuses and it keeps blowing the fuse. So it's got to be something up with that motor, I'm assuming. I mean, I'll be honest with you guys, I have no freaking clue. Sure, I could Google it and I might throw it in the video here. I'm going to inspect that. I've never seen anything like that. And it's got some kind of almost fuse looking thing up in there. So I don't know if that's bad on the old one and that's what's giving us issues, or if it's just the fan. I think it's really the fan motor, because we used to smell like a burning smell. And I haven't smelled that since this thing has not been connected, the old one. Well, the fuse has been blown for like over a year because it keeps blowing the fuses. And with this being a little 1.6, as long as it's not too hot out and you're not in stop and go traffic, it actually doesn't overheat. But we are having issues in the stop and go with it getting too hot because the fans aren't kicking on. So I'm pretty sure it's my motor, because like I said, we used to smell burning smell, and it was probably that motor burning up. But anyways, that's why I'm replacing it today, because ours keeps throwing fuses every time it tried to kick on. So we're putting a new one in here. And you got to go through this exact same process to remove the radiator. So if you're repairing or replacing your radiator, this is going to be the same process. So that would be why you see the little notation on the thumbnail, and radiator. So we're not doing the radiator, but we literally have the radiator hanging out of this car, and it's just a few more steps after that, you know, disconnecting the hoses and whatnot to get out the radiator. I will show you guys that fuse later on in the video, because we're definitely going to have to replace it. But I'm going to start by taking this plastic fascia off here. Just got these little, they're kind of like push clips, but you know, they're plastic. You got to use a little screwdriver there to back them all out. So I'm going to pull all those out. I'll show you one up close. Pop that plastic off, see what else we need to remove. There's what those look like. So basically with the screw driven all the way down in, it flares out the end. Will not let you remove it, but once you back them out like that, you can pop them out. I don't think you have to remove this hood latch, but I did because I was trying to get my fan out right there, but it doesn't work. You got to take the whole front bumper cover off. Alright, I got that up out of the way. We are detached here. And yeah, this whole front bumper cover is going to have to come off. This thing just slides and hooks in to the radiator, but it won't come off. It's kind of hard to show you guys, but there's a piece that runs across the top that's kind of like holding everything down, so it won't let me just slip the radiator fans off. So go ahead and take this piece off. You just got to pop out these pins here, like so. That's actually all attached, but obviously those had to come out anyways to pull this whole thing off. So now I just basically got to go around the whole freaking car, pull the rest of these off, so I can get all the pins and any bolts and screws to get this thing off. So I'm going to go ahead and work on that, and then once I get it off, I'll show you all the locations of all the fasteners. Alright, there's with the bumper off, which was kind of a pain to get off. I've certainly had easier in the past. So obviously we already took the top ones out. You got these clips here that kind of go in there. You can either unscrew them, but I found they just popped out super easy. They do have a little tiny metal screw in the back though. This was the real pain part. So these little clips snap in here. You can see you got your little arm there. It's kind of pinched down, and then the open part here loops over that. So you got to kind of push up and then pull out at the same time while you're pushing up, but it hits against this headlight. So what I did on both sides, see it's loose there, I took those two screws out on both. That way as I pull up, and the headlight will push up with it, and it was a lot easier to get that up. So you kind of pull up and then give it a light jerking motion out, and it'll snap out. And then kind of the same thing right here with some of this junk. They snap into there. You see it'll hook over and then it's pressed down by this. So kind of the same there, push up and then kind of jerk it out. And that's pretty much it. You just get these things out on the side there. There's a few that go in through the bottom of this thing, just those two there. and then use that method I just discussed there and on both sides and pop her off of there. And you're undoubtedly probably going to break a few of these. I broke one, so always a good idea to have a bunch of spares of those. I actually use I got a kit that's got all kinds of stuff in it. I'll throw it up on the screen here, and there'll be a link in the description for that. That thing's been a lifesaver so many times. I hate having to run to the parts store for just a couple little clips. I just got this whole kit, and it has basically everything in it I would ever need. I use it all the time. But there's the cold air intake, if any of you guys watched the intro video on this. And down there's our little pulley. On the old channel, I got a bunch of videos on this car, including the install for that cold air intake and pulley and whatnot. If I can link the Rio playlist off of that channel, I'll put a link to that in the description under the video. Well, now you can see the radiator, and this is actually the AC condenser, a little tiny thin radiator that goes in front of the actual radiator. And you detach everything there, you'd be able to pull it out the front. Of course, this is that stinking core support I was talking about. I think it's freaking plastic. I'm not 100% sure, but if you ever wanted to remove the headlights there, I think you would have to take that bumper cover off. You might be able to finagle it out of there without removing the bumper cover. I'm not sure. You got that right there and that right there. One of them slips in here and the other one hooks onto this. And then you got to kind of like pull it up and wiggle it and all that. Kind of tip it up and pull it out. It does pop out. So that bumper cover was a little bit of the pain, but now seeing how far we have this thing stripped down, this is insane. You got great access now to everything. So for this level of having the whole front end of the car apart, that actually wasn't bad. Now, generally speaking, a lot of people tell you disconnect the battery before you start any work on a car, and most times it's not required. But I gotta say, now that I gotta tear some of this stuff out of the front end, I could definitely run into some airbag sensors or crash sensors or something up in there. So I am going to go ahead and disconnect my negative terminal here. All right, so here, as you can see, there's a whole fan assembly, and you know, it's loose, so it's just even if I took this piece off, it ain't coming out because this is in the way. So obviously I got to take out these mounts right here, but this whole stinking metal, your actual bumper, not your bumper cover, where it bolts to the frame here, it goes through this plastic piece. So got to take that off and anything else that's attached to it on the way to get it off. So I'm going to work on that now. All right, I got the stinking bumper off that went across the front here. You know, you got two big bolts, top and bottom, on both sides. And then you got this little 10mm nut that holds it on both sides. Then the whole thing comes off. Had to, you know, detach my horn and unclip all those and all that fun crap. And I took this little guy off here. See, this is where it's hitting. As soon as you try to pull up, it just hits that. So I took that cover off so we could see better up in there. However, you notice this whole thing's wobbling. So pretty much it's just sitting right there. Those are little rubber grommets. You literally just pull up and it'll come right out of that. So I'm thinking I can pivot this forward. Once I pull it up, I can tip the top. I got to be careful not to bend these aluminum lines too much to the AC condenser here. Because if I take this whole thing off, which, you know, there's just a few bolts like that, it appears anyways, there's one there, everything's going to drop. Like, absolutely everything will drop. So I don't know that's really going to help me much. I would kind of have to have like 4 arms. So your whole radiator and condenser is going to want to fall as soon as this comes off, because that is what it's sitting on. So I'm going to try to just pop up here, same thing on the other side, and then see if I can pivot the top out enough to slide the fan off. So I almost got it there. You see it's kind of falling this way, and I can just about get our fan out, but this pipe is holding it back, which obviously attaches up here, and that runs to where I believe the thermostat is. I popped this earlier and I could see coolant down in there, but with it like this, it's running all down this pipe. I can tell this one's empty right now. So I'm actually just going to detach right here to hopefully not spill too much coolant, maybe none at all. And then I'll be able to pull that far enough forward to where I could finally slide that thing out. Otherwise I gotta unclamp here if this is going to be in the way, and it is going to dump a bunch of coolant everywhere. Okay, not too bad. I did lose just a little bit of fluid there. That's a 1 liter bottle, not a 20 ounce, not a 2 liter that came out of there. And where am I leaking from? Oh, this thing's still leaking a little bit. Gotta capture some more of that. Okay, there's the stinking fan finally. There's about where I had it to get it out. Of course, now that this is at an angle, it's going to drain even more coolant. I pulled this up and then slid the thing out the bottom. So now we can work on getting everything put back together with the new one. Alright, so I got the new one back in place. We got her shoved in there. Got it sitting back up on the support on the little rubber grommets there. Obviously, I'm just doing the fans, but if you guys are doing the radiator, it's the same freaking thing. I mean, obviously you're going to have to undo your radiator hoses, and you're going to have to take this AC condenser off, and you just pull this tab back right here. See how it hooks on there? And then you'll be able to slide it up. See? You got one top and bottom on each side, and that thing will slide off your radiator, and you can kind of carefully pivot it out of the way and then pull your radiator out. So basically the same process to get your radiator here out, and just detaching everything that's attached. And then obviously you're going to have to fill it back up and all that, which I will be going over at the end of this video because we did lose some coolant. So I'm going to have to add some more and burp the system and all that. But got mine back in the fan, and so now I just got to throw everything else back together. You know, I'm going to triple check everything before we start the car up and all that, but this comes with a new line here. That's the old line, so I can just I'm gonna need 2 hands. It's in like a little clip there. Pop it out and hook it up there instead of reusing the old one. So don't forget that you need that line hooked back up, whether you use a new one it came with or repurpose your old one there. Very important. Alright, got everything back on there. Of course, double, triple check all that. I'm leaving that off for the moment because I'm going to do oil change while I'm at it. But other than that, it's ready to go. For the time being, I've left these bolts out so I can tip this up a little bit. And it's actually, this line's holding it back. I might just pop that off so I can tip it up further. So it should be okay because we didn't lose a whole lot of coolant. But if you ended up doing the radiator also, and just to be safe, you want to burp the system. As you pour it in here, some's going to go down to the engine, some's going to go down to the radiator. But undoubtedly, you will get some air pockets. Still, you want to pour it in nice and slow. That way, you're not getting air in there. A nice, steady, slow stream to fill it up, both sides, radiator and engine. But you'll usually get some air pockets in the system. You got to burp them out with that cap off there. So to do that, you'll start the car, you'll let it idle until it heats up the full operating temperature, at which point your thermostat should open, and then start letting coolant flow through the system. You might see some bubbles coming up. As they do, it will commonly leak out, and or you'll see your coolant level go down, so then you'll have to top it back off as it keeps drinking the coolant down as air pockets come out. Tipping that pipe up and down can help with that some. Then ultimately, I almost always have to hold some RPMs, give it some revs to get that water pump spinning to get even more air out of the system. So I'll hold it between like 2,500 and 3,000 RPM on this car. And then you'll see some bubbles start to come out. It's best to have a helper watch the gauge to make sure it's not overheating with air in the system, and then also hold the RPMs for you while you're under the hood watching it basically burp and get the air out of the system. If it stops burping, let off the gas, get back on it again. You usually get some more, and you basically just repeat that until you get all the air out of the system. You don't see any more coming out. At which point you want to take it for a test drive down the road. Of course, before you start any of this, you need to make sure your coolant reservoir there is full. Drive around the block a few times, make sure it's not overheating or anything like that, and then you should be good to go. It means you burp the system properly. If your temperature gauge is varying up and down while driving or coming to a stop, then you still got air in the system and you still need to burp it some more. However, use extreme caution. If you still need to burp it after that, that system is now pressurized, so you will need to let the car cool off first before you pop that cap, or it's going to send that boiling hot liquid all in your face because it's under pressure. So if you have to come back and do it a second time, you need to let the vehicle cool off first before doing it again. Also, sometimes while you're burping the system, sometimes when you shut the car off, a bunch of bubbles will come out and you start it back up and it'll continue the cycle again. So sometimes that helps also, shutting it off every once in a while. A lot of times bubbles will come out. It depends on the car, but all right, a little easier to hear me now. We got no more leaks. So if you couldn't hear me, I had coolant running down the underside of this pipe. It was steady stream coming off of here. I thought we might have cracked this plastic housing, or maybe my radiator hose twisted loose, but it was just running out here down the bottom. When I went to feel it, the bottom was dry, so I didn't think that was what was occurring, but it's because this pipe is so hot now. By the time I went to check with my hand, the little snail trail that was left from it running down, it had already dried up. I was like, well, it's not wet, so it must not have been from this running down, but that's exactly what it was. So be cautious of that. If you see it pouring down off of here while you have the cap off burping it, that's probably why. Anyways, that does it for this one. Leave me a comment down below. Tell me what you think. Thanks for watching, and I hope to catch you on the next one.